On today's show, I'm starting my top 30 prospect rankings for 2024. Who are some new names on this list, and how bright is the future for the Texas Rangers after winning that 2023 World Series championship? We're talking about all that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the World Series champion Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan covering this team for 10 seasons, including all 5 as the founder and host of this podcast. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. Now, before we get into this episode, today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50 plus infections. Get yours at jasemedical.com and use code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. That's JASEmedical.com. Now, I've talked a lot about the Rangers farm system over the last couple weeks or so because, unfortunately, the Rangers are not making any big moves in free agency like they have in years past. There's not as much speculation to be done about how big free agent signings are going to impact the Rangers. I mean, they've signed basically 2 guys, and they've been solid signings. But, you know, it's always fun to look at the future. And while there aren't, I don't think, any other major publications besides Baseball America is the only other publication to unveil their top 30 Rangers prospect rankings. I figure, you know what, I'll go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off and be one of the first ones to get in my top 30 prospects, because I feel like it's about time. It's the new year, and the Ranger system is in a very, very good place. Obviously, the big league team is in a very good place after the most delightful year in Rangers franchise history. And the state of the farm is pretty solid. Now, it's not quite as deep as it's been in years past. Going through this top 30 in this process, it was a little harder to find names that I was really excited about in the final 5 spots of this top 30 list, where in years past it's been at least the last couple years the Rangers have had such a deep farm system that it was more difficult to cut off names after 30. I mean, it was a very, very deep farm system. Now, the top end talent wasn't quite as much there as it is right now. I think you can probably guess who the top 2 or 3 prospects are in my list. Hint, spoiler alert, it hasn't really changed much from mid-season last year, but this is still a very deep farm system with a lot of guys with major league potential that could really help this club, either as a inclusion in a trade package or really just end up helping the major league club. I've kind of my philosophy on prospects has changed just a little bit with mainly in regards to bullpen arms. There's a lot more guys who I think will end up being bullpen arms on this list than there have been in years past, and part of that is because the Rangers need bullpen help, and part of that's because just realizing, okay, that actually does have some value of being able to develop guys with high end or back end bullpen kind of ceilings. That is something that has value, and something the Rangers haven't done the best job at, outside of, Jose Leclerc and a really nice stretch run from Josh Sborz, and outside of that, it's been kind of rough. So I've kind of put more of an emphasis on that and more value in that. But without further ado, let's get to number 30 on this list. We have outfielder Aaron Zavala. Now, you may be thinking, Bryce, Aaron Zavala had an awful season. What are you doing? What are you thinking? Well, if you don't know Aaron Zavala, he was the Rangers' second-round pick back in the 2021 draft out of the University of Oregon. There was an issue with his medical. There was a medical kind of a just scary diagnosis that the Rangers weren't exactly sure if it was going to be career ending or not. Thankfully, it ended up not being career ending. It was I believe it was a tumor on his spine. It was a very scary injury, but thankfully he could play through it and he'll be okay. So he got a significantly lower bonus than a second round pick normally would get. And the main things with Zavala that are in his favor, well, I think he can legitimately play a pretty decent corner outfield spot, probably left field. But his batter's eye, I mean, it's incredible. His knowledge of the strike zone is exceptional. And you may not think that from his strikeout rate from this year, which was honestly abysmal, but it is truly an elite skill. So much so that Baseball America, before last season, had him as the best strike zone discipline prospect in the Rangers system. That also included Evan Carter. Just keep that in mind for how high this guy's ceiling is. They also had him as the best average hitter in the Rangers system, in a system that had Evan Carter and still had Josh Young in the system at that point. That is how highly he was thought of before this season. Now, I guess 2023 season, now that we are in 2024. Now, this was, no lie, a really rough year for him offensively. He was coming off of a surgery where he missed significant time. And I think that this is more of me betting that he will bounce back in 2024, get more of his athleticism back, because the power numbers were not great for him this year. In 95 games, he had just 5 home runs and 16 doubles. I mean, his batting average was below 200. The on base was still very good because, again, he's got just a crazy walk rate in his career, like in the minors and in college as well. 174 walks for him in just over 1,000 plate appearances in the minors. That is his bread and butter. He's got some power in there when he can tap into it. He needs to be a little bit more aggressive. And obviously this year, coming off of that surgery, he just didn't have that same level of pop to be aggressive and take advantage of mistakes in the zone. He still made pitchers work, and that's a valuable thing. But the high end is, I mean, he fell all the way from, I believe he was around, I think in my top 10 before last year. Even at midseason, I dropped him a little bit, but not that far. But this is him just barely hopping in there. I'm a big believer still in Aaron Zavala. I mean, the concerns about his long-term health really are going to prohibit him from being much of a trade chip. So if you're seeing any, prospective trades that are including him in there, just kind of ignore those, because that there's not going to be a whole lot of value in trading a guy who's 23, who's probably going to go back to AA, I think, this year. Maybe he'll start in AAA. We'll see how the Rangers feel about him after spring training, but I'm still a big believer in Aaron Zavala and his upside. In terms of a long-term spot on the Rangers, well, the outfield's pretty settled. There's quite a few better candidates than at DH than him in the Rangers system right now, so it's more of a believer in his ability to control the strike zone and actually be a decent left fielder. But we'll see where he ends up, but I'm still a believer in Aaron Zavala, in the ceiling, and him being a major league caliber player. Now, the next guy was another guy who had a really rough year. This is third baseman Glider Figueroa. He is 19 years old, and he had his first stint in full season ball this year with the Down East Wood Ducks. He is basically just played third base. That has been his primary position. Eventually, he might move over to a little bit of second base. He's played just 2 games at second base in his minor league career, but Figueroa is a guy who's got a lot of power potential. Didn't show it as much this year in his first year of full season ball. It was rough for him. 107 games, 450 plate appearances, hit 220 on base, just at 300, and slugged just over 320. Not a super great showing from him. The strikeouts were kind of a problem, but hey, in your first year of full season ball, being 2 years younger than the average player, I mean, Glider Figueroa showed some potential. I mean, he still had 9 home runs and 14 doubles. I mean, he was solid. It was an unspectacular year, but this is more of a sign of where the Rangers think of him, and more confidence in that than anything that he particularly did at that level. I mean, a 623 OPS isn't great, but he's a 19-year-old in full season ball and playing third base and showing decent power and showing a decent walk rate. I mean, he wasn't completely overmatched, and that's a solid sign. Now, if he starts to struggle a bunch in year 2 of full season ball, then you start to get a little bit more worried and a little bit more concerned, and he might end up dropping off this list. But hey, still solid first full season of full season ball. Not as exciting as what he had done in years past, where he had 9 home runs and 5 triples in 41 games back in 2022, or that was a near 900 OPS from that season from him. But still, encouraging signs from him, and I'm still a believer in his upside, despite a not super great 2023 from him. Big 2024 coming from him. I'm hoping probably back at low A, but could see him in high A. If he's in high A, probably had a great spring training, and it's a good sign that the Rangers feel good about his development, despite the numbers not quite being there in 2023. Coming up, we're going to look at the number 28 prospect on this list and some other guys, some new names in the next segment possibly the segment after that. Prior to this word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL regular season is done. There's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 if win or lose. You can make some bets on the Cowboys, who won the NFC East. You know, a lot of fun bets to be made there in their playoff game against the Packers. If you're feeling good about them, you can go play some money on them. Or if you're wanting to emotionally hedge your bets and bet on the Packers if you're a Cowboys fan, so that even if the Cowboys lose, you're at least winning money. Head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Shout out to the everydayers making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. On tomorrow, I'll be back with the middle third of my top 30 prospects. Some really interesting names there, including a couple of very, very high risers on this list. Now, let's get into the next guy on this list. Number 28 prospect on my top 30 prospects is Alejandro Ozuna, who is a outfielder signed out of Mexico. He is 21 years old, just turned 21 in October. He hits left-handed, plays left field, center field, right field, basically all of the different positions in the outfield. But most of that has been in left field. He's played 113 games at all levels in left field, 76 games in right field, and 49 in center field. He had a solid season this year. Also in Hickory, also played in the Arizona Fall League as well, and just put up really decent numbers. I mean, him being a 20-year-old in High A Hickory was a huge sign that the Rangers were pretty big believers in him. He even made his Hickory debut as a 19-year-old last year, just 21 games at that level, but still put up half-decent numbers there. And this year was a pretty solid year. He had on base over 380. His slugging percentage wasn't super high, but he's not been a guy who his ceiling is mainly based around his power. It's more of a well-rounded kind of profile. And he had a 386 or 85 slugging percentage, so a OPS in the mid 760s, pretty solid numbers overall for him. 46 walks to just 67 strikeouts. His discipline there was really, really solid, and that's one of the things that I like about him. Having those numbers of walk to strikeout rate as a 20-year-old in High A is very, very impressive, and the Rangers liked him so much that they wanted to give him a few more plate appearances. Only 70 games for him in the regular season this year. Sent him to Surprise for 4 games there. Didn't put up the best numbers, an OPS of 527, not super impressive, but again, it's 16 plate appearances, not a super big sample size. I'm curious to see where they start him next year. He didn't get all that many plate appearances in Hickory, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if he's a 21-year-old starting in Double-A every single day, and that's an impressive thing. That is a sign of how much the Rangers are believers in him and how well he can do and how much they believe he is ready to handle. Now, let's look at the next guy on this list. Number 27 prospect is Trevor Hauver. He was one of the guys included in the Joey Gallo trade, one of the probably the last one that the most people think of. Obviously, there's Josh Smith and Ezekiel Duran and Glenn Otto, who have all had impacts at the big league level, and I think that Trevor Hauver is going to have an impact at the big league level. The profile on him has been, left field / DH type. There was a while that some thought he could be a second baseman. That time is over. Hauver is a guy who has a very good judge of the strike zone, like Zavala. Has shown a little bit more power than Zavala has, a little bit more able to tap into that this year. 12 home runs for him in 107 games at Frisco. Also played in the Arizona Fall League last year in 2022. Had a really solid showing there, and on base over 400, slugged 400. That was really impressive to see from him. The batting average has always been a little bit low. It hasn't been super great, and for a guy who's biggest asset is his judge of the strike zone and being able to work a lot of walks, you'd like to see that batting average be higher, so the on base can be a little bit higher, especially since the power doesn't seem to be elite. It seems to be above average to plus, maybe a little bit above plus, depending on how much he can actually tap into that. I mean, the raw power I think is pretty solid, but again, it's more about being aggressive in the strike zone. I think he'll be a fine left fielder / DH. Again, there's not a whole lot of room at the major league level for on the Rangers for prospects like that, but those guys have value. Other teams have troubles developing hitters sometimes. I mean, even the Rangers have. But yeah, there's definitely some value in that. And his judge of the strike zone, he'll probably be starting in AAA next year. He's going to be 25. It'll be his age 25 season next year. But I think that there's definitely some value there. He's a left-handed hitter with on-base ability. And I think that is someone who definitely has some value. Let's move to the next guy on this list. Number 26, we have Marc, the first reliever on this list. He was added to the Rangers 40-man roster this offseason to protect him from the Rule 5 draft. The guy has got the nastiest slider in the Rangers system. It is absolutely hellacious, but the ability to stay in the strike zone and not walk a lot of guys has been his real bugaboo. I mean, in Frisco this year, he had 15.5 strikeouts per 9 in 18 innings. That's amazing. But he also walked 5 guys per 9. And then when he jumped up a level to Round Rock, I mean, he had an ERA in the mid 3s, which is, fine for a guy who's 22 and in AAA. But he walked nearly 6 guys per 9, and the strikeouts were under 10 Ks per 9, which is fine, but it's not going to be something that gets you on the big league roster out of camp. I think he's still got some refinement to go. His fastball is solid, but he's basically fastball slider. And it's just about staying in the zone enough to keep hitters honest and make them enticed to chase, as opposed to just, waiting on you to throw ball 4 yet again. But the ceiling is pretty high up there. I mean, he's got, 13.4 Ks per 9 in his minor league career, which is just really, really good. But the walks are right around 4 per 9 innings, which is not great. It is not. We've seen what it's like to have relievers who can strike everybody out and can walk and will also walk the world. It is sometimes very difficult to watch. But again, relievers who don't have walk issues usually are starters, and that's kind of why most guys end up in the pen, is that they cannot stay in the strike zone but have some really nasty, wild stuff. If the Rangers can develop him or one of the few other relievers on this list to be a solid back-end reliever, that would be a really great thing for them, as they wouldn't have to spend money on guys like a Josh Hader or whatever other big-name reliever that fans are clamoring for the Rangers to go spend $15 to $20 million a year on. You got to be able to grow young relievers, and Marc definitely has the ceiling of a really nasty reliever. Again, getting that walk rate under control a little bit more, being a little bit more accurate with its fastball will definitely help that slider play up, because that slider is really dang good. Now, let's go to the number 5 player on my list. This is a new guy on this list, Marcus Torres. He is a 19-year-old out of Marque, Venezuela. That's where he was born, and the Rangers have made him all the way up, promote him all the way up to down east as an 18-year-old. An 18-year-old outfielder who hits left-handed. He also plays a little bit of, basically corner outfield. He's also played a little bit of first base as well. 28 games at first base, 7 games at center field, 42 in left field, and 24 in right. So basically a corner outfielder / first baseman. Has played a few games at center field, but I don't think that's where he is going to stick necessarily. Those were all in the Dominican Summer League back in 2022. This year was a really solid year in the Arizona Complex League. That's where he played most of his games, just under 50 games. He had 6 triples, 7 home runs, had an on-base just 2 points below 380, and an OPS of 872. The guy had a pretty solid walk rate of 27 walks to 48 strikeouts, and then played 10 games at Down East, where he did not do well at all. But again, an 18-year-old in full season ball for 10 games, 41 plate appearances. That is a sign that the Rangers are big believers in this kid. The power has been solid, walking at that higher rate, while being 18 in the Arizona Complex League. It's a sign the Rangers think this kid is legit. They are a believer in his talent and think that he is better than those down east numbers. I'd assume that's where he starts next year. But again, I'm excited about the ceiling on this kid. Not a whole lot of data out there because he is an 18-year-old, but already having this level of information on a kid who is 18, who has already had this number of professional plate appearances. He had an 859 OPS last year as a 17-year-old in the Dominican Summer League. Really excited to see what this kid can do. And he already made the Rangers top 30 prospect rankings at the end of the season for MLB Pipeline. That is a big sign that the Rangers are believers in this kid. If he is already making those rankings when he had, less than 100 games under his belt when he made his debut on that list, that's pretty darn impressive. And I am very impressed with this kid. Coming up, we're going to look at the final 4 players on my top 30 edition for today, including a couple of names who I think could really help the Rangers big league club in 2024. Right after this word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. I know we come to sports to talk to escape the crazy realities of life, but can we talk about a minute about preparing for tough situations? Whether you're on extended travel or bracing for a major weather changes or limited by yet another supply shortage, you are covered, my friend, thanks to our partners at Jase Medical. Life-saving antibiotics and a long list of daily medications can be ordered in a 1-year supply. So, Jase Medical, they've got the Jase case. They are out there to provide for you. The Jase case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial infections, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, among others. This stuff could happen to any of us. So go visit jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It has never been more important to be prepared than today. So go to jasemedical.com and use offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. Shout out to the everydayers for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. On Wednesday, I'll be back with the final 10 of my top 30 prospect rankings, including some guys who you might have heard of and might be really, really excited about. Not that you're not really excited about all these guys, because the number 24 guy on my list of top Rangers prospects is Zak Kent, a right-handed starting pitcher that the Rangers drafted in the 9th round of the 2019 draft out of the Virginia Military Institute. Last year was a year I thought that he was going to make his major league debut. I thought he was really going to help the Rangers out in their bullpen because Lord knows they needed help in their bullpen. But alas, that was not the case. Injuries derailed most of his season. He has been fairly healthy throughout his minor league career, but last year was really a rough year in terms of staying on the mound for him. Just 40 2/3 innings between Round Rock and a debut or a rehab stint in the Arizona Complex League. The Rangers sent him to Surprise for the Arizona Fall League, got 16 2/3 innings in there. Not exactly super encouraging stuff. He had an ERA of 8 in those innings in Surprise. In Round Rock, he had an ERA under 4 in 10 starts, but he was averaging basically 3-ish innings per start, 3.1, not 3 1/3, but actually, maybe it is about 3 1/3, 34 innings in 10 starts there. But the Rangers view him as a starter. He's a guy who's got a really interesting repertoire. He's got basically 5 pitches that all come out of the same arm slot and look very, very similar. His slider is his best pitch and has been his most used pitch. He's able to throw it 4 strikes and able to get some chase on it as well. He's got a 4-seamer and a 2-seamer that work pretty well. And the changeup also, all of those complement each other pretty darn well, and I believe he's also got a curveball, or maybe it's a cutter that I'm thinking of, but as his 5th pitch. But it's mainly that slider, fastball, both 4-seamer and 2-seamer combination that all work very, very well off of each other. In terms of the ceiling for Zak Kent, I think that maybe a number 5 starter could be his ceiling. I think he'd be more effective as a guy who you throw him in the back end of the pen, let that velocity crank up a few miles per hour into the upper 90s as opposed to the low to mid 90s where it sits as a starter. I think that could provide a lot of value for the Rangers, maybe as a multi-inning reliever, a guy who can get you through 6 or 9 batters, go through the order one time through, give you multiple innings. I think that could be something that that's what I thought his role was going to be for the Rangers in 2023. Alas, injuries ruined that. I wouldn't be surprised if he made the Rangers bullpen out of camp this year. And I think he's probably going to be competing for that number 5 spot in the rotation at this point. I'm still thinking the Rangers will go and sign some other starting pitcher, hopefully Jordan Montgomery. But right now it's Cody Bradford that is going to be the Rangers' number 5 starter if things remain unchanged, at least for the first half of the season. By the way, just a little note on rookie eligibility and prospect eligibility. As long as the player has their rookie eligibility intact, they are eligible, or I guess able to be put on prospect lists. They're still rookie eligible. So Evan Carter still has his rookie eligibility while Cody Bradford does not. Those metrics for what it takes to lose that, it's 50 MLB innings pitched or 130 at-bats. Evan Carter did not hit that threshold while Cody Bradford did. So Bradford is not going to be on my top 30 list, even though I am a big believer in Cody Bradford, like I am of Zak Kent. Think he can really help this team in 2024. I think they're going to keep him as a starter for as long as they can, just to hope they can develop one decent starting pitcher. He's going to be 26 this year. But still, I think the upside is pretty solid on Zak Kent. We'll see. This is going to be, I think, a pretty big make or break year in terms of if he is going to be a starter or if he is going to be a bullpen arm. Either way, I think he can definitely help this major league team, and I am a big believer in Zak Kent and have been for a couple years now. Next guy on this list, number 23, is Jonathan Ornelas, who made his big league debut and did have his first hit in the major leagues, which was an exciting moment for him. He is 24 years old this season. He is a guy who plays basically every single position. The offensive upside is not great. He's a 3rd round pick from 2018, but he has really been a solid defender at many, many positions. He's a legitimate shortstop. He's a legitimately solid to above average, I think, defensive center fielder. He can play third base. He can play second base. He can play, I think, the corner outfield as well. But that's a guy who has a lot of value, who is a legitimate defensive shortstop. There's been more value and more emphasis placed on that being a valuable tool at the major league level, with the defensive shifts being limited as opposed to what they were in years past. Guys can't just be placed immediately in the exact right positions every single time, especially that big shift that they did to almost every single left-hander in the game. So defensive range at shortstop and second base and third base has been more highly valued. And Jonathan Ornelas definitely has that. He's a great clubhouse guy, a great makeup guy. Is fine. His average with the stick, not a great year offensively for him in Round Rock, despite making his major league debut. He went 1-for-7 in 7 at-bats, but again, he got his big league debut, got his first hit. They can never take that away, and Round Rock had a 728 OPS. Not super great, but the on-base is mainly his carrying tool offensively. That's the thing that he is going to keep him around as a major league bench bat option. I don't think he's going to got the ceiling of an everyday player, but still a very solid, valuable 25th or 26th man to have on your roster. The Rangers already have a couple of those guys who I think are obviously a little bit ahead of him in Josh Smith and I think Ezekiel Duran. But in terms of being a legit good defensive shortstop at the major league level, Jonathan Ornelas has definitely got that, and that is something that has quite a bit of value. Now, the number 22 guy on this list is a guy who has not been on any of my top 30s before, midseason or otherwise. This is catcher Jesus Lopez. He hits left-handed, throws right-handed, 6'1", 180 pounds, signed out of Lara, Venezuela. He is 18 years old and already playing stateside ball this year, actually exclusively playing stateside ball this year in the Arizona Complex League. Only 13 games for him, just over 50 plate appearances, but in that limited sample size, there was some very, very encouraging signs from him. 3 home runs in 13 games, as well as 2 triples and 3 doubles. Hit a little bit under 1 point under 290, on base near 400, slugged almost 650, an OPS of 1,041 as an 18-year-old in 13 games in the Arizona Complex League. That is a big, big green flag for him. The upside is pretty high, but again, 13 strikeouts for him is not a super high rate, especially being at that level. We'll see where the Rangers start him. I wouldn't be surprised if he started in full season ball just to give him some more at-bats. He had 38 games in 2022 as a 17-year-old in the Dominican Summer League, an OPS of 768. Pretty solid numbers for him there, more walks than strikeouts, which is encouraging as well. But there's not been a whole lot of buzz on this kid. Made MLB Pipeline's top 30 prospects at the end of last year, so that is another green flag in his resume. Whatever, wherever you put your green flag, maybe a green pennant on his wall. Now, the last guy in this first edition of the top 30, or first episode in the top 30, number 21, Antoine Kelly, a guy who I am very excited to see hopefully make his major league debut in 2024 with the Rangers. A left-handed reliever, was originally drafted in the 13th round by the Padres, then in the second round by the Brewers, included in the Matt Bush trade, which the Rangers seem to have won very handily, if not for just the contributions of Mark Mathias. I think Antoine Kelly will make this a slam dunk big win for the Rangers, especially since Matt Bush was already back on the Rangers like about a year after that trade was made, which is not great for the Brewers, but great for the Rangers. Kelly was protected on the Rangers 40-man roster. That is an exciting development for him. I thought he was going to be taken in the Rule 5 draft last year. I definitely thought if he was unprotected, he was going to be taken this year, but the Rangers decided to protect him because they are big believers in him, or at least medium believers in him. I was honestly surprised he didn't make his major league debut last year, but because the numbers were so good for him in two different leagues across AA and AAA, pitched 57 and a third innings, 79 strikeouts to just 23 walks. The walk numbers went way down as the season progressed. Even as he got promoted to a higher level, those walk numbers went way down while the strikeouts were still there. That is very, very encouraging. The stuff is very nasty. Comes out of a weird slot, or not a normal slot. Can do okay against righties, and if he can keep getting those walk numbers down and still get to the swings and misses and get them against big leaguers, I wouldn't be surprised if this guy's in the pen opening day, because the ceiling is pretty solid for a back-end reliever in Antoine Kelly. That's going to do it for today's show. Thank you all so much for listening and subscribing, and until next time, don't forget to enjoy World Series champion Texas Rangers baseball.